Welcome to Wealth of Words, where we explore the depths of thought-provoking books that shape our understanding of the world. I'm Richard Yura, your co-host for today.
And I'm Isabella. Together we'll be your guides through today's literary journey.
So we're diving into The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf Dobelli. It's a fascinating look at how our minds can trip us up and, more importantly, how to avoid those mental pitfalls.
It's like a toolkit, right? For making smarter decisions in your daily life.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's about recognizing those sneaky biases and flawed thinking patterns we all fall prey to often without realizing it. Dobelli gives us a framework for recognizing these traps so that we can navigate around them.
And before we get started, we'd love for you to follow the show and share your thoughts and feedback. Your insights are always appreciated. Now, are you ready to unpack some of these mental traps and learn how to think more clearly?
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
All right, let's start with survivorship bias. Dobelli uses the example of a musician named Rick who's obsessed with making it big. Rick focuses only on the rock stars selling out stadiums, those success stories we all see, but he never considers the graveyard of artists who never made it.
It's like looking at a forest and only seeing the tallest trees. Right? We miss the vast majority that didn't grow as high.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah. You're working in listeners' field. I'm sure you see this all the time. People focus on the outliers, the big successes, and forget about all the hard work and, let's be honest, luck that goes into it.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid falling into this trap ourselves? Should we be spending all our time researching failed projects?
Not necessarily. It's not about dwelling on failures, but rather acknowledging that they exist. It's about seeking a balanced perspective. Before you jump into a new project, don't just research the success stories. Look into the common pitfalls, the reasons why similar ventures failed.
So to apply this to our listener, before you make a big decision in your work, ask yourself, what are the graveyards I'm not seeing? Where are all the people who tried this and didn't make it?
Exactly. That question can help you make more informed and honestly more realistic decisions. Because let's face it, not every project is going to be a home run.
All right, so we've tackled survivorship bias. What's the next mental hurdle we need to clear?
Let's talk about the swimmer's body illusion. Dobelli talks about Nassim Taleb, who was drawn to swimming because of swimmers' physiques. He thought, if I swim, I'll get a body like that. But obviously, those swimmers didn't develop those bodies because of swimming. They were already built that way, which is why they were drawn to the sport and excelled at it.
Oh, I get it. It's like thinking that going to an Ivy League school makes you smart, when in reality, those schools select people who are already high achievers.
Right.
This applies to so many areas of life. I catch myself thinking, if I just follow this successful person's routine, I'll be just as successful.
Exactly. It's so easy to get caught up in the outcome without considering the pre-existing factors that contributed to that success. But here's the key takeaway for you. Focus on the process, not just the image of success. Are you chasing a specific outcome in listeners' field because it looks glamorous? Or are you genuinely enjoying the daily work that actually gets you there?
That's a really powerful question to consider. It's easy to get distracted by the shiny results and forget about the actual work involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you're not truly engaged in the process, the journey will be miserable, even if you achieve what you set out to do.
Okay, so we've talked about survivorship bias and the swimmer's body illusion. What other mental pitfalls should we be aware of?
Let's explore the clustering illusion, which is our brain's tendency to find patterns even in random data. Dobelli gives examples like seeing Jesus on toast or finding patterns in stock market data.
Seeing Jesus on toast, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
But I can see how our brains try to create order out of chaos.
Exactly. But this can be dangerous, especially when making important decisions. You might think you found a hot stock based on a pattern, but is it statistically significant or just luck? The same applies to patterns in your work. If you see what looks like a trend, make sure it holds up under scrutiny. Don't just rely on your gut feelings.
So how do we avoid getting fooled by these illusory patterns? Should we just ignore our intuition altogether?
Intuition can be valuable, but it's crucial to seek statistical verification before jumping to conclusions, especially when making high-stakes decisions. Look for data and evidence to support your observations.
That makes sense. It's about balancing our gut feelings with a healthy dose of critical analysis and data-driven decision-making.
Exactly. Don't let your brain's natural tendency to find patterns lead you astray.
This is why I love diving into books like this. It's full of practical wisdom that we can apply to our everyday lives.
Absolutely. And speaking of practical wisdom, let's move on to another intriguing concept. The herd instinct, or social proof. Have you ever noticed how people tend to look up when everyone else is looking up, even if there's nothing interesting in the sky?
Haha, yes. It's like an automatic response.
Yeah.
We assume there must be a reason why everyone else is doing something, so we just follow along.
That's precisely the power of social proofing. Dobelli talks about Solomon Ash's experiment where participants were asked to judge the length of lines. When Confederates intentionally gave wrong answers, the participants often conformed even though the answer was obviously wrong.
It's kind of unsettling to think that we can be so easily swayed by group pressure, even when we know better.
It is, and this can have real consequences leading us to make decisions that aren't in our best interests.
So how do we break free from the herd and make more independent decisions? Especially in a field like yours where there's so much pressure to follow trends.
You're right, it's a constant challenge. But the key is to develop critical thinking skills and question assumptions. Before following a crowd, ask yourself, would I do this if I were the only one doing it? Does it align with my own values and goals?
That's such a powerful question. It forces us to think for ourselves rather than blindly following the crowd.
Exactly. It's about having the courage to stand apart from the crowd when necessary, even if it means taking a risk or challenging the status quo.
This is great. Let's move on to another mental trap Dobelli highlights, the sunk cost fallacy. He shares a story about his wife insisting on finishing a terrible movie simply because they had already paid for it.
Oh, we've all been there. We stay in a bad relationship, keep investing in a failing project, or hold on to a losing stock simply because we've already invested so much.
Yes, we feel obligated to keep going even when it's not rational. I'm curious, have you ever experienced this in your work? Maybe pouring more time into a project that just wasn't working?
Oh, absolutely. It's hard to let go of something you've invested so much in, especially when it's your work, your passion. But that's exactly when it's crucial to step back and ask yourself, if I hadn't already started this, would I choose to start it now? If the answer is no, it's time to cut your losses and move on.
That's a great tip. I'm going to remember that one. It helps shift our focus from the past to the future.
Right. It's about recognizing that sometimes letting go is the smartest and bravest thing we can do.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already. Survivorship bias, the swimmer's body illusion, the clustering illusion, the herd instinct, and the sunk cost fallacy.
And we're just getting started. Dobelli's book is a treasure trove of insights into the quirks of human thinking.
I'm eager to hear more. What other mental traps does Dobelli unveil in his book?
Welcome back to Wealth of Words. We're uncovering all sorts of sneaky mental traps from The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf Dobelli.
It's amazing how these seemingly small biases can have a huge impact on our decisions, especially in a fast-paced field like yours.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so important to be aware of them. So let's talk about reciprocity. It's that deeply ingrained human tendency to feel obligated to return favors.
Oh yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I often feel compelled to reciprocate even for small gestures. Sometimes I even end up giving more than I received just to make sure I don't appear ungrateful.
Right. That's exactly how this principle can be used strategically, sometimes even manipulatively. Dobelli gives those great examples like the Hare Krishnas giving flowers before asking for donations or supermarkets offering free samples to entice shoppers.
Ah, those are classic examples. I never really thought about it that way, but it makes sense. We get a small gift and suddenly we feel obligated to buy something even if we didn't plan to.
Right, and it's not about rejecting kindness. It's about recognizing when this principle is being used to influence our behavior. It's about making conscious choices rather than reacting out of obligation.
So if someone gives me a free sample, I don't have to buy the product.
Exactly.
That's reassuring.
You can politely decline or just acknowledge the gesture without feeling pressured. It's about setting those boundaries.
What about those situations where we genuinely want to reciprocate but feel pressured to give more than we're comfortable with?
It happens. In those cases, be upfront about your limits. It's perfectly okay to say thank you, but I don't feel comfortable accepting anything more.
That's a good reminder. Sometimes we need to prioritize our own well-being, even if it means saying no to someone.
Exactly. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about confirmation bias. This one's particularly sneaky because it often operates below our conscious awareness.
Confirmation bias. Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more about this one.
It's our tendency to seek information that confirms our existing beliefs while ignoring or downplaying information that contradicts our views.
I can see how this plays out in our world today, with the constant influx of information. It's so easy to filter out anything that doesn't fit our existing narrative.
Precisely. This leads us to become more entrenched in our beliefs, even if they're not accurate or well-founded. It's like we're building echo chambers around ourselves.
So how do we break free from these echo chambers? It seems like a tough one to crack.
Well, Dobelli highlights a powerful technique, actively seeking out disconfirming evidence. He points to Charles Darwin, who meticulously documented observations that contradicted his theories, forcing himself to confront potential flaws in his thinking.
That's a pretty counterintuitive approach, but it makes sense. Instead of just seeking validation, we should be actively seeking out challenges to our beliefs.
Exactly. It's about cultivating intellectual humility and being open to different perspectives.
I love that idea of constantly challenging our own beliefs.
Yeah.
It seems crucial for growth, especially in a field like yours that's constantly evolving.
It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers and that learning is a lifelong process.
This is so valuable. I think we could all benefit from incorporating this approach into our lives.
Absolutely. And speaking of learning and growth, let's move on to our final bias for today, authority bias.
Authority bias. All right, let's hear it.
This one refers to our tendency to blindly follow authority figures even when they're wrong. We defer to experts or people in positions of power without critically evaluating their claims.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
We're taught from a young age to respect authority, whether it's our parents, teachers, or bosses. It's ingrained in us.
While respecting authority is important, it's crucial to remember that even authority figures are not infallible. They can make mistakes, have biases, or even abuse their power.
Absolutely. History is full of examples of what can happen when we blindly obey authority.
Dobelli cites Stanley Milgram's experiment, where participants were told to administer electric shocks to another person. Despite their objections, many obeyed, even when the shocks supposedly caused severe pain.
Wow, that's disturbing, but it underscores a crucial point. We need to be cautious about blindly following orders, even from those in positions of authority. I'm curious, in your line of work, have you ever encountered situations where you felt pressured to conform to authority, even if it went against your better judgment?
It definitely happens, especially in fields with established hierarchies. It can be intimidating to question someone with more experience or a higher position.
So how do we navigate those situations? How do we avoid falling into the trap of authority bias, especially when it feels risky to speak up?
It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
You want to be respectful while also being assertive. When faced with a decision from an authority figure, pause and ask yourself, does this make sense? Is there evidence to support this claim? Are there other perspectives I should consider?
That's a great approach.
Yeah.
It shifts us from passive obedience to active engagement and critical thinking.
Exactly. Remember, authority doesn't equal infallibility. Question everything.
This has been an insightful conversation. We've explored so many fascinating mental biases, from the art of thinking clearly.
We've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover in Dobelli's book.
I'm definitely adding it to my reading list. What a valuable resource for anyone who wants to make better decisions. I'm curious, what's one key takeaway you think our listeners should walk away with today?
Becoming aware of these biases is an ongoing process, not a one-time fix. It's about constantly challenging our own thinking and being open to new perspectives.
Yeah, it really is. Like, it's almost empowering in a way,
It is.
to recognize that we have these weaknesses,
Yeah.
but that we can actually do something about them.
Exactly.
It's incredible how much we've learned about our own minds just by scratching the surface of this book.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The art of thinking clearly really lives up to its name. It's like holding up a mirror to our own thought processes and exposing those subtle biases that influence our decisions.
Absolutely. It's been eye-opening to explore these mental traps, from survivorship bias to authority bias and everything in between.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but the key takeaway is that becoming aware of these biases is an ongoing process. It's not a one-time fix.
That's a really important point. It's like building a muscle.
Yeah.
We need to constantly exercise our critical thinking skills and challenge our assumptions to avoid falling back into those habitual patterns of thinking.
Precisely. And that's where Dobelli's book is so valuable. It gives us the tools to become more mindful of our thinking and make more conscious, deliberate choices.
So what's one practical step our listener can take today to start applying these concepts to their own life?
Here's a challenge for you. Choose one bias that resonated with you from our discussion today and try to spot it in your own life this week. Pay attention to your thoughts, your decisions, your interactions with others. You might be surprised by what you discover.
That's a great challenge. I'm going to try that myself.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how many times I fall into these mental traps without even realizing it.
Yeah, it's an ongoing process of self-discovery and improvement. And the more we practice, the better we become at recognizing and mitigating these biases.
Well, this has been a truly enlightening exploration of the art of thinking clearly. I feel like I have gained some valuable tools to sharpen my thinking and make more informed decisions.
Me too, Richard. It's been a pleasure diving into this book with you and our listeners.
And to our amazing listeners, thank you for joining us on this intellectual journey with wealth of words. We encourage you to share your experiences and insights on our social media platforms. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep those minds sharp and those thoughts clear.